Does this ammunition make the 32 ACP relevant again? Federal Hydra-Shok Deep and 32 ACP. I'm going to compare that to the 380 version of the Federal Hydra-Shok Deep. So I'm going to use pocket pistols for this, my Kel-Tec P32 in 32 ACP and my Ruger LCP in 380 ACP. Our 32 auto is a 68 grain jacketed hollow point rated at 1,000 feet per second, and our 380 ACP is a 99 grain jacketed hollow point rated at 975 feet per second. So why I think this ammunition could potentially make the 32 ACP relevant again is because a few months ago Dan the Wolfman sent me various different 32 ACP rounds to test, and I ran a couple rounds in a gel test, and one of them happened to be the Hydra-Shok Deep, and that looked like from that preliminary test that it did really well. And we also didn't have any issues with cycling or anything like that. And what's great about this ammunition is it's very long. It's very long compared to most jacketed hollow point bullets. It's as long as a full metal jacket. So that alleviates the possibility of getting rim lock. And people who say that rim lock is not a thing, I've got that like 3 times in this particular pistol. 2 of the times with a very short jacketed hollow point round, and 1 time with some Buffalo Bore hard cast. It was just too short of ammo, so what would happen is that that second round down in the magazine would be fully pushed forward in the magazine. It just shifted, and then the first round in the magazine would be pushed back further, and the rims would be locked, so your gun is pretty much malfunctioned and you can't clear it on the spot. But with a round like this, that should prevent that type of issue. And in that preliminary test with this particular ammo, it looked like we got some expansion. What makes Hydra-Shok Deep kind of cool is the way they design these things. You know, most ammunition is like a jacket, a hollow point, and the lead and the jacket expand. With this, it's more or less like there's a big thick post in there, and it's more or less like a semi-wad cutter, but then you also have a jacket on the outside, and the jacket kind of like just external barbs. The jacket is really the only thing that expands out. So that allows you to get better expansion with lower powered rounds. So we're going to see how these do in my little pocket pistols here. So I'm going to go through the chronograph, see what kind of velocity and accuracy I get at the same time. Then I'm going to do my 10% clear ballistic gel test. So I'm going to go into plain 10% clear ballistics to see what the best potential of those cartridges are. No denim in the way or anything like that that could potentially clog a hollow point and reduce the expansion. That'll give us our best, chance for expansion to see what those bullets are supposed to look like. Then I'm going to do a real world simulation where I'm going to have 4 layers of denim on this first 3-inch piece that represents hitting a pectoral muscle, followed by a 1/4-inch medium density fiberboard that represents hitting ribs or sternum, 16 more inches of clear ballistics, and another 1/4-inch medium density fiberboard at the back to represent hitting back ribs. Clear ballistics is roughly a half representation of the density of flesh. So when you're seeing 3 inches and 16 inches here, really what that equals is about a 9.5-inch individual with ribs on the front and the back, because 3 inches is really like 1.5 inches in flesh, and 16 inches is more like 8 inches in actual flesh. So we'll do our plain clear ballistics best potential shot, then a real world simulation shot, and then I will shoot at the steel target to see what kind of practical accuracy and shootability I can get with these. So let's get started with this test. All right, first up we have our 380 ACP 99 grain jacketed hollow point, rated at 975 feet per second. I believe that rating's through a 4-inch barrel. But let's see if we get my little 2 3/4-inch LCP here. See how close I get to 975 feet per second. .860. 869. 888. 879. 857. So not bad velocity overall, and pretty consistent velocity. So our 32 ACP here, 68 grain, we are rated at 1,000 feet per second. So let's see how I get in my little Kel-Tec P32 here, see how close I get to 1,000 feet per second. .888. 883, 866, 897, 885. So I can safely say these are pretty much the same velocity, just one is a 68 grain and one is a 99 grain. So let's hit our ballistics gel block with these and see how they compare. All right, we'll do our plain clear ballistics shot. No denim in the way to potentially clog a hollow point. No rib simulation in the way to slow down its penetration. So let's see what we get with our little LCP here with our 380 ACP. All right. Set that with our 32 ACP. Let's go take a look. All right, so better performance than what I would have thought with something like this. You know, and with that 32 ACP, there's a lot of bullet rollback in that channel, and generally I only see that when the expansion, at least at some point, was much larger than the starting diameter. So that opened up a channel big enough for a smaller diameter bullet to roll back into it. So it looks like at least at some point those pedals were expanded out pretty big with that 32 ACP. Now with the 380 ACP, there's definitely a larger track of damage going on there, and that's true cutting damage. That's what that looks like. And if we look at our energy dump here, which simply means, you know, what's the likelihood it expanded right away in this first 3-inch piece by looking at this, we can definitely see that the 380 expanded right away. With our 32 ACP, it doesn't quite look as good, but it potentially did expand right away. It just, the track just doesn't look as impressive. And when we look at the start of this main block here, we can definitely tell that that 380 ACP had a lot more damage in there, because there's a very wide cut pattern when it first enters this. And I see striation marks, which really indicates that it was expanded and those pedals were truly cutting. And with our 380 ACP, we went to about 13¼ inches of penetration. I know camera parallax will push this off, making it look like it's probably an inch further up, but yeah, we're right there at about 13¼ inches. Now when we look at our 32 ACP, we are spot on exactly. That track goes exactly to 12 inches. The expansion looks like it's possibly not as big, but it does look expanded consistently, and it met our minimum penetration we want to see. So that's not bad overall. So let's put on our denim put in our rib simulation and see how these compare in our real world simulation. All right, our real world simulation, 4 layers of denim followed by 3 inches of clear ballistics, represents hitting a pectoral muscle, followed by a 1/4 inch medium density fiber board that represents hitting ribs or sternum. 16 more inches of clear ballistics, then another 1/4 inch MDF at the back to represent hitting back ribs. Let's see how our Hydra-Shok Deep 380 does. All right, let me set that denim back up and then we'll hit it with the 32 ACP. All right, real world simulation, 32 ACP. Let's go take a look. All right, surprising results there. You know, it kind of looks like our 32 did a little bit better, but it does look like from this first view that our 380 was expanding, but our 32 was not. But I'm kind of okay with that, because with the power level we're working with, it's likely if that 32 expanded, it would be extremely subpar. The 380 is already subpar. It's likely that 32 would have been very subpar. So we'll look at this rib simulation here. And our 380 here, our 32 here, it's very apparent that something was going on here. That looks a lot like tumbling, as where our 32 went straight. But, you know, definitely a bigger hole, which would, you know, say that that's expanding at least. As where the 32, it's just a punched hole through. So that denim definitely impeded that 32's ability to expand out of that pocket pistol. But what we got going on here with our 380 ACP is we got about 9 inches of penetration. So that's some subpar penetration, but that's not necessarily not enough. You know, a lot of people don't like rounds that don't go to 12 inches, and they say, you know, because the FBI says this and that, and they think that this means it won't penetrate enough. This actually absolutely will penetrate enough for a front-on shot. You know, the reason why 12 inches is one of the numbers that the FBI testing lists is because they're calculating you want to get at least 12 inches in gel to simulate going through an arm from the side and then entering the thoracic cavity, and 12 inches in gel equates to roughly 6 inches in flesh, and that's just enough to hit a vital organ from the side. But this is still really equating to about 4.5 inches in actual tissue. So a front-on shot with this would be plenty of penetration to hit, you know, necessary things to shut down a threat. Now our 32 ACP, this had a total penetration track of about 14 inches. So overall, you know, going from our real-world simulation to our plain clear ballistic shot simulation, you know, our 32 technically did a little bit better. That being said, it's likely that the 380 would do a little bit better in a real-world situation to stop a threat, because you're likely going to make front-on shots. So you're going to get some expansion every time, and you're working with more energy. That being said, the 32 seems to have enough. If you didn't hit like fabric or ribs, it would probably expand. If you did, it might not expand out of a short pistol like this, but it's going to penetrate enough. So I would say both are equal in their performance. And the reason why I say equal is because the recoil of the 32 is like half the recoil of the 380. So that could give you a little bit more accurate follow-up shots because you're not anticipating that recoil so much. So that equals it out to me. And we might see a difference in how I shoot these on the steel. So let's pull these out of the block. We'll take a close-up look at them. Then I'll shoot our steel and see if there's a big difference from that little extra recoil with the 380. All right, so here's a close-up look at these bullets going through plain gel, our 380 ACP and our 32 ACP. So both of these did okay in plain gel, especially our 380 here. You know, the petals expanded out quite large, and they stayed expanded out. So that made it a bigger expansion overall. Now when we look at our 32 ACP, the petals peeled back, so that would suggest that this has a little bit thinner jacket to make up for that a little bit less energy, which is a good design overall, because you want that jacket to expand and cut, but you don't want it to be impossible to open up. So it's not a bad design. There was a lot of thought that went into this, apparently, and I would bet from whatever pistols that their test barrels are, these would probably perform perfectly, because there's engineering going into that, and you don't do engineering to get to nowhere, you know. So when we look at the ones through our denim and MDF, there's our 380 ACP, and here is our 32 ACP. And our 380, looks like part of that bullet expanded and stayed out, and part of it peeled back. So that could indicate that maybe it went through a little bit tumbling and skewed. But overall, not bad. It's just really underpenetrated. And when we look at our 32, there's absolutely zero expansion, but I'm okay with that because it is only a 32. And what I really liked was that nose stayed oriented straight forward. And we saw that through the MDF that this was punching a clean hole. So that's exactly what you're going to want with something that's not going to expand. You don't want it to go through sideways, because then you're at the same place that this is at, or worse, because a lot of times, you know, lengthwise they're wider than an expanded hollow point widthwise, and that'll really limit your penetration. I see that sometimes with FMJ ammo where they're keyholing through and they're not penetrated enough. So the fact that this has a hollow cavity that kind of keeps it oriented straight a little bit, you know, because a lot of the weight is in the back, there's a little bit of weight removed from the front. They kind of want to orient straight, you know, through targets and through air pretty well. So honestly, this right here is a good 32 overall, in my opinion, because if it would have expanded in that denim and everything, it would have underpenetrated. So it kind of did what you want it to do out of a pistol like that. And this expanded with, with no denim in the way, and it probably would do that with just like one layer of t-shirt too. And this got just good enough penetration. So honestly, really good overall. This is okay. It's better than a lot of 380s, but there's a lot of 380s out there that can kind of do about as well. But for its recoil is actually pretty low, so I would say that's not bad performance for the recoil. So that's a close-up look at those bullets. All right, 14 yards from the target, so I'm just going to try to hit the target as fast as I think I can. I got my extended grip on my LCP and standard grip on my P32. So both are holding 8 rounds right now, but the P32 definitely does it with a lot smaller size going on. So let's see what I can do here. Just practical accuracy. Gonna get a front sight picture and pop these off as fast as I think I can hit the target from this 14 yards, and see how I do with the 380 ACP. Alright, so I got a failure to extract with that. I think it's just this pistol. I replaced the spring in it with a heavier recoil spring. It did help for like a couple months, and now it's kind of back to being a little wonky, so I'll keep going. Alright, so for a 380 and an LCP, this is actually not a bad round. I've shot a lot of different rounds in this 380, and a lot of them do have substantial amount of recoil because the pistol's so small, but to be honest, this doesn't have that much. I don't know what they're doing to make it have less, but it just seems like less than typical. So our 32 ACP, let's see what we get with this. Definitely less thought process with this, and quite a bit less recoil. I'm not going to say it's half the recoil, but it's probably 50% less recoil. So just a little bit easier to control than the 380, and I feel more confident with it. So let me back up just a little bit and see how these do from just a little more distance. All right, so I decided to come back to just 25 yards, which is closer than what I like to normally shoot from. But, I know a lot of people are not going to see 40 and 75 yards as practical pistols like this. So 25 yards is probably still about as far or further than what I think a normal person would, try to protect themselves from with a pistol. I mean, there could be outlier situations, but 25 yards is still pretty far for these little pistols here. So let's see how I can do with this LCP and 380 from 25 yards. See how this thing shoots. All right, so that thing has a good amount of recoil. Like I said before, that's not a lot, but I mean, when you're trying to slow it down and just focus, it does want to kind of buck up quite a bit when that recoil happens. But not too terrible. It is trending a little bit to the right for me. So let's see how I can do with our little 32 here. It's got less of a grip than that extended grip 380. So see how I can do with this thing. 25 yards. All right, out of ammo. So I can't really tell where they're all hitting. It looks like one hit a little bit low, so it must just be hitting basically in the same spot. So with this, yeah, there's a little bit less anticipation of that recoil when you're shooting really slow. So looking at these ammos, they're both not bad considering the size of the pistols. These are very small pistols, very short barrels. I think this Kel-Tec is like 2.7 inches, and the LCP is 2.75. So very, very small pistols. And, you know, but looking at the size of the pistol, I honestly like the 32 a little bit better than the 380, just because when you go this small in 380, which is a good caliber, it's almost too much. It's kind of like taking a little light snub nose, aluminum framed snub nose with a 2-inch barrel and chambering it in 357 Magnum and then carrying 357 Magnum. It's just not that practical. You're going to want to carry that with like 38 Special plus P. Yes, it's more effective with the 357 Magnum, but it's one of those, is the juice worth the squeeze things? No, because you're getting basically barely over 9mm power with a 357 Magnum with like 4 times the recoil on a gun like that. And that kind of translates over to what I'm talking about here with these pistols. It's not that much of an extreme difference between like 357 and 38, but you know, when you go down to the 380, it's just a little bit uncomfortable to shoot. The recoil is just a little bit unmanageable for an average person, so you really have to focus on trying to shoot that thing well. And that's just not something that I personally would want in a self-defense option when everything else is already going to be going bad, and you need, you know, the best of your abilities, and then you add to something that's very hard to control. With the 32, even without thinking about it too much, I can more accurately place shots. So it's just something you have to think about a little bit less, and you have to think about the functioning of it a little bit less, because, you know, you can't really limp wrist that 32 very easily. So for these particular options, I like the 32 ACP a little bit better. And what's great about this ammo, I'm going to say that the Hydra-Shok Deep is the best ammo for 32 ACP pocket pistols currently. Now with the 380, this is a fine ammo. It did pretty well, but there's a lot of good options, and there are some that are better in 380 ACP than this. So it was an average, okay, good option, but, you know, there's a lot of things to choose from. 32 ACP, basically people either have to carry FMJ ammo because they're worried about rim lock, or they have to get inserts into their magazines that push the rounds up, or have to get a different 32 pistol that might not conceal as well as something like this. So this ammo, it's as long as ball ammo, so you don't got rim lock. It gets adequate penetration, and you could potentially get expansion with some particular shots that, you know, might not encounter a lot of fabric. You know, just let's say you had one layer of t-shirt or something on front of your target. It's likely it would expand even through that and through ribs. So you kind of get the best of everything there with this particular 32, because you potentially can get some okay expansion. It's moving in a straight line. It's not yawing about, and it's penetrating just enough. If it doesn't expand, that non-expanding hollow point still seems to orient it in a straighter line, so it's not yawing about, which can, you know, basically make your shot placement better. A lot of people talk about shot placement. What they don't talk about is sometimes small calibers will hit something hard, veer off, and not hit, you know, where you think your shot placement is. With a round like a non-expanding hollow point, it's going to drive it straight, so your shot placement is true to the outside of the target and true to the inside of the target. So I'm going to say this 32 ACP is the best current 32 ACP for a little pocket pistol. So that's what you get today. So as always, comment, share, and like, and thanks for watching.